I was walking through Key West a few days ago and I saw this on one of the storefronts. Imagination is everything. It's the preview of life's coming attractions. Einstein is quoted as saying, "I'm enough of an artist to draw freely upon my imagination." Imagination is more powerful than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, but imagination encircles the universe. From a symbolic point of view, one of the best stories about the power of imagination comes from the book of Genesis, the 30th chapter, and it's a story about Laban, Jacob, and the spotted and striped sheep. You may be familiar with Jacob's ladder, which is that dream that Jacob had where he was climbing a ladder and there were angels coming up and down the ladder. The ladder represents our step-by-step realization of truth. And the angels, which represent higher thought, represent this going up and coming down, this ascension and descension in consciousness that's going on in every moment in our own mind, until we become fully established in a stable mind. My Buddhist friends used to say, one illumined thought, you're a Buddha. One negative thought, you're ordinary again. So in the 30th chapter of Genesis, we find that Rachel and Jacob have given birth to Joseph, this amazing child who Jacob gives the rainbow-colored coat to, this child of their later life that goes on to be such an amazing leader. And Jacob realizes that he's spent enough time in his father-in-law's shadow. And so he asks his father-in-law, Laban, a noble and wealthy landowner and sheep farmer who he has cultivated and given so much to his whole life, if he could move on and if Laban would give him the gift of some sheep. And Laban agrees. Jacob suggests that he go through the flocks and he take out the speckled and the striped and the spotted and the black ones, and that he leave the rest for his father-in-law. And although Laban says this is fine with him, there is deception. There are lies. There is treachery. As there often is in these stories and in our consciousness. So what Laban does, even though he says yes to this agreement, is he asks his sons to go and take all those speckled, striped, and spotted sheep out of the flocks and put them in hiding. But this does not discourage our visionary Jacob, because Jacob has the long view. What he does is he takes poplar and almond branches and he planes them and he peels them, exposing white stripes and spots. And he places them near the watering hole where the sheep go and feed and also mate. And he lays a lot of them where the strongest of the flock can see them and breed among them and have the vision of stripes and spots. And he waits, and he takes the spotted and the striped young, and he breeds the strongest flock. And he leaves with Rachel, and they have a rich and fulfilling life. So what does that mean metaphysically? Well, sheep represent our thoughts. And Jacob focused on what he wanted to give birth to. And he was discouraged by other people's treachery. He did what he could do to keep his vision alive. And he waited. And he got the manifestation of his vision. He gave birth to what it is that his highest vision was. Logic will get us from A to B. But imagination takes us beyond the limitations of the mind. Many of you may not know this, but George Washington, during the Revolutionary War, wrote in his recollections that he was incredibly discouraged. When he was encamped at Valley Forge, he had a vision while he was on his knees praying to be given strength and to be shown what to do. A blinding light surrounded him, and he was shown an image of a vast and prosperous country. He recognized this as a vision of the future United States, and his heart and his mind were filled with ecstasy. He remembered this vision because it gave him the courage and conviction to help him win the war. And after the war was over, he held to this vision and said it made him a tireless worker in helping to perfect the Constitution and establish this country on a strong foundation. So in times like this, when we don't know what the future will bring, we must choose to do like these mystics did. We always have a choice what to think and what to see. We can be optimistical, or we can be pessimistical. We can certainly find evidence in our world for negative ideas, and we can cling to those. Or we can have a vision and a trust in a far greater thing that's going on than we can currently see, and hold out for a greater vision. Essentially, the process of spiritual development is about taking the thing that we're most afraid of and looking our addictions in the eye and observing our habitual states of negative mind and things like the coronavirus and any current problem that we think we can't solve, and offering it to the divine in us and all around us and everywhere present, completely surrendering to the need to know the outcome, admitting, I don't know. When we give up this need to be right, this need to know, to be the knower, we can trust God, trust love, trust Goddess, trust all that is in the process of life. I was listening to Carolyn Mace last night have this beautiful idea that only something divine could have conceived of something so great that it sent everyone home to work on their healing and health. If you don't know, Carolyn Mace was first famous as a medical intuitive because she had this uncanny capacity to be able to read other people's illnesses. She was more accurate than tests. They tested her at the Menninger Foundation. They would call her and they'd say, someone's in my office and he's 22 years old and he's from Texas. And she would say, congestive heart failure. I mean, she would just know what these people had as diseases. But as time went on, she realized that's not so great of a gift, because it doesn't matter that I know you have congestive heart failure. The important thing is that you know, and that you know before you get it. And so she spent her life trying to help people to heal and to be in touch with their own intuition and their own healing power. So now she's at home and she's giving these beautiful teachings on asking for guidance, working on your health, and letting go. The Taoists say the way is easy. It's simple for those who have no preferences. And one of my teachers, Virginia Satir, used to comment, some people would rather have the certainty of misery than the misery of uncertainty. Think about that. It's really hard for some of us to say, I don't know. But that is really an important step. Fear that we don't know does not keep us safe. And if we pitch a tent in fear and try to hold on to some other belief really rigidly, it can actually immobilize us and make us even sicker mentally and physically. Because the purpose of spiritual growth is to remove the blocks that keep us stuck in fear. There's a story that a young woman had been told that there's a monster, an evil, human-eating monster in that room. And so she walks by really fast every time she has to pass that room. And then she walks faster and faster because in her imagination, this monster is just getting bigger and uglier and more ferocious until one day she becomes so overcome with fear that she collapses and she realizes she has to pick herself up and go in there. And so she does. She opens the door. And what do you think she finds? More room. Nothing's in there. And that's always what happens when we face our fear, is that we have more expansion in our consciousness. When we're aware of our fear, when we can say, I'm afraid, then we can unlock and unleash that energy that's keeping us stuck. And when we let go in that moment, we can create, we can use that energy for healing. We can use that energy to move us forward. Our brains lie. Our memories are not facts. The wisdom that comes through only what we see will never free us from the illusions. And our past constantly being rechurned in our brain will only keep us doing what we did and being the way we were will dominate our lives. Being really brave and truly courageous means waiting. Like Jacob, having the long view, following the creative guidance you receive, even if you don't like what's happening, even if it scares you to do it, because in doing so, you stretch your spiritual muscles. We spend countless hours in our negative imagination through mental rehearsal, retelling our dramatic stories, through watching our media constantly churn the worst out of these events. Our politics and our media are completely obsessed with negative imagination. So mature adults come to realize that that's the real enemy. Those images that we take to be true. And the biggest and most cunning adversary is our own mind. If we could admit our negative tendencies as individuals and as a nation, that would be a huge achievement. That would be something miraculous coming out of the coronavirus. That's a step in the right direction. Because qualities exist in us. They take their form in our politics. They take their form in our media. They're us. We're not separate from them. A really good perspective to take in times like this, when it's bringing out the worst of us, is to say, there, but by the grace of God, go I. Knowing that if I walked in that person's shoes, if I had my head filled with that kind of ideas, I'd be doing that. It would be best for us as a human species if we could really try not to vilify people, even when they're really obnoxious and unkind. Because angry, difficult people are insecure, wounded, and disconnected from their hearts. I remember reading through a chart of a young child who had been so severely abused that I thought when I met them, they would be very ill mentally. But what I saw was this little Buddha who would always draw me rainbows. And one day, we were playing this game where he had a face of his father who had seriously abused him. And he would hold faces of different animals and people and play them out, give me their stories. And one day I said, one day you're going to grow up to be a father too. And he said, holding the mask, putting it down, holding the mask, putting it down, I'm going to be the best father ever. And you know why? I said, no, why? He said, because my father never meant to hurt me. And he put down the mask. He said, my father loves me, but the anger and the hatred he took in. This is a little kid in Vietnam, because he was a vet and he wasn't like that before. He had PTSD and he would lock the kid in a closet and stuff. He said that anger and that hatred is so strong in him, it just spills out on the people he loves. And that's the truth. People can be so aggravating and disappointing and so mean, as we all sometimes are. Humanity is a work in progress, and hatred will never evolve us. So keep searching for that part of someone that you can relate to, that you can empathize with. This is the unity way. Find the points of agreement, even when it's a stretch. Look for the good in what someone is saying. Be the first to forgive. Be the only one in a room full of people who has anything positive to say. Speak words that uplift, or don't say anything at all. Give yourself and everyone else your best. And forgive yourself when you can't. Don't waste your time settling for little dreams. Dream big. Imagine living in the most beautiful world you can imagine. Believe that something great is going to come out of this coronavirus experience. A more sustainable world. A gentler, kinder, more compassionate people. Believe in your dreams. Because we don't know exactly what will happen. Like Jacob, we can plant the leaves and the branches of what we want to see. So here's a little piece of a vision. I affirm, and you can hold this with me if you want, every man, woman on earth is my holy self. Every woman is my sister. Every man is my brother. All living beings are my kin. We're one. And in a state of oneness, I imagine us holding hands. I imagine us embracing each other with love, walking together through bountiful gardens, protecting our sacred forests so that every living being is healthy and living harmoniously on this earth. And I hold this image of one human family with respect and love for a living planet Earth and all its inhabitants.